and welcome back to AWS On Air. I am your host, Brian Terry, and I'm a senior solution architect focusing on ISV integrations. And I'm joined here with my co-host and friend, Mary. Mary, how about
Thanks,
you
Brian.
introduce yourself?
Yeah, thanks so much. It's really good to be here. I'm excited to have an audience with AWS On Air. My role at AWS is I'm the senior partner lead for sustainability. So all of the innovation that partner us that is solving for sustainability on behalf of our customers.
Very cool, very cool. And if this is your first time joining us, we're happy that you're here. We have a survey, that we're putting out there, and the first 50 people that complete it get $10 in AWS credit, and you should use this to create the cloud infrastructure and help with sustainability. So we're joined today with two special guests, Parth and Nisha. So Parth, how about you introduce yourself?
Hi, everyone. I'm Parth Patel. I'm a solution architect over here at AWS, and I'm helping enterprise customer accelerate their journey to the cloud. My focus area is machine learning and sustainability, and I'm presenting some of the deep diving architecture review with my friend Isha.
Yeah, Isha, how about you introduce yourself?
Sure. Good afternoon. Happy Friday, everyone. I'm Isha Duan, a senior solutions architect here at AWS. I also work with enterprise customers. I understand their challenges and then guide them on how they can architect their applications in a cloud native manner on AWS cloud, making sure that they're resilient while doing so. I am very passionate about environmental sustainability, and my areas of specialization are also machine learning and sustainability. Looking forward to the conversation today. Thank you.
Excellent. Before we kick things off, I want to ask Parth and Isha, since it's National Dessert Day, what's your favorite dessert?
I am not a dessert person, but I'm going to say that it's going to be tiramisu. There we go.
Awesome.
Okay. I will go with tres leches.
There we go.
All right, so let's talk a little bit about this. So let's talk a little bit about, why is sustainability important to our customer and what's going on with this pillar? Can you talk a little bit about that?
So sure, I'll take that. So Mary has already done a wonderful job explaining a lot about sustainability. I'm going to double click a little bit on that. We're going to start with I want to start with this fun fact that I just recently learned. So there's a carbon neutral group, and they put out a recent study which had a metric. It said that worldwide, it's estimated that data centers consume about 3% of the global electric supply of the world and account for about 2% of total greenhouse gas emissions. And this is about the same as the entire airline industry. So this was shocking to me, by the way. But just to dive deeper into what this means, it just means that we have to start at the data center optimization level. And we here at AWS are focused on efficiency and continuous innovation across all of our global infrastructure. We are on a path to powering our operations within our data centers with 100% renewable energy by 2025. And that's where our journey of data center optimization has begun. We are the largest buyers of renewable energy in the world right now, and we're also continuously innovating and sort of looking into ways we can make the process of bringing in electricity from the grid to the data center, also trying to reduce conversion losses in the journey. So that's about the data center piece. But Mary and Sandeep also pointed out water optimization, right? So AWS has done a lot of work to minimize the energy that we use for data center cooling by using things like evaporative cooling and cooling with outside air, recycling the water. And we're making sure that we're introducing a lot of these advanced set of processes around water management as well. Other than that, there are these new instances that AWS has launched. I'm sure a lot of you already know of the EC2 instances, which is our compute offering in the cloud. We now have these Graviton instances, Graviton 2 and 3, which give very good performance and can help you reduce your carbon footprint by just moving over to Graviton. These instances use 60% less energy and give you the same level of performance as any other comparable instance. Another thing that AWS is doing is we're trying to also improve the overall resource efficiency of our data centers, which means reducing the energy and the carbon footprint of the systems that are running on AWS and that is being used to run AWS. So we have like a lot of centralized services. So we have network, we have storage, we have compute, and each service here has a dedicated service team. And the role of the service team is to manage the capacity according to the demand that is being generated from the customers. And each team focuses on optimizing and reducing the cost of operating these services. One example would be like take our EC2 teams, like our Elastic Compute Cloud teams. They incentivize the use of spare capacity by offering you a 90% discount off the on-demand pricing with spot instances. So what this does is it gives us the ability to actually use all the spare capacity that we have in our data centers and be sustainable while doing so. And another example that I would like to point out would be a higher level service. Nowadays, a lot of people are talking about serverless architectures. And one of our serverless compute offering is that of a Lambda, AWS Lambda function. So when AWS Lambda was launched at reInvent about 8 years ago at this point, it was running a dedicated EC2 instance per customer because we wanted to meet the desired levels of isolation and security, but that also meant a lot of increased resource usage. One instance per customer per Lambda function was too much, right? So now we've made a change. Now it can run on bare metal instances that are controlled by Nitro. And we have a virtualization technology called Firecracker, which allows you to launch these new secure micro VMs very quickly and also reduces the overall overhead for this entire service. So, these are some of the steps that AWS has undertaken. There was a 450, I wanted to also mention the 451 research report. The 451 research is a part of the S&P Global Market Intelligence. It found that AWS can actually lower your workload's carbon footprint by 88% compared to the median surveyed US enterprise data centers. And if you compare it to the European enterprise data centers, it can actually lower your carbon footprint by 96%. These estimates are calculated using the greenhouse gas protocol. This report is something that is shared publicly. You can view it. These are easy to understand data visualizations as well. So yeah, like I said, lots happening with AWS right now.
Oh yeah, super interesting stuff. This kind of just brings a couple questions to my mind. Like number one, how will our customers approach the idea of sustainability when architecting workloads in the cloud? And number two, how should they use this well-architected pillar?
Yeah. So I'll start with why it's important. First of all, why is it important for my customers or our customers to look into this? As Mary already mentioned multiple times, that sustainability trends are increasing at a rapid rate right now. We see customers wanting to talk about building their sustainability goals. They want to talk about their sustainability journey. They want to talk about their projects. They want to understand how they're going to innovate faster to achieve this sustainability transformation. How do they reduce their energy consumption, or how are they going to identify their carbon emissions or collaborate with their supply chain vendors to identify what their carbon emissions look like? So there's a lot that the customers are now interested in. It's a long journey, and we have to set the right goals for short term as well as for long term. And not just customer demand, we are seeing increased government regulations which are driving all kinds of businesses at this point to think about sustainability. It's touching different industry verticals. It's touching multiple sectors of the society right now. There's also a lot of employee demand, actually. There's a lot of employee demand and enthusiasm around sustainability because, even I as an employee, I want to do something, leave the world a better place, like make it sustainable for the future generation. So there's a lot of employee demand around sustainability. It's also become very important as a part of competitive positioning. And how companies are defining their brands. For example, you'll see these grocery stores branding themselves like zero waste grocery stores. We don't use plastic, or we offer reusable produce cartons. So it's a lot to do with how organizations are also branding themselves at this point. And the last point I want to touch upon is about impact investing, socially responsible investing. Investors are also very keen and they want to invest in things that are helping the planet rather than destroying it. So, all these reasons are very important. Like, this is why you should be thinking about sustainability. This is why you should be thinking about decarbonizing your operations, managing your water, following sustainable labor practices, and making sure that you're recycling so that zero waste is going to landfill. So this is important for right now. I also wanted to mention that sustainability is a shared responsibility. I'm sure a lot of you have heard about security in that space, but sustainability is also one of those areas where we will manage the sustainability of the cloud for you. So our systems, our data centers are going to be optimized for following sustainable design principles, but it is up to you to make sure that you're managing sustainability in the cloud. When I say that, I mean that you're architecting your workloads in such a manner that they are following best practices for sustainability. So that's where the well-architected pillar will also come in.
Yeah, Aisha, I think for me, that's where it's really important that we support customers. And well-architected is a tried and true framework that I've sat through many hours with customers. I've seen some of them that go well into the evening, and they're a great way of really looking at the architecture you've built and being intentional about it. So maybe, as we look at sustainability and the outcomes that you just talked about, which are really important, the solutions that are being built that solve for sustainability, as well as the well-architected to ensure they're built sustainably. So maybe just a little bit more detail about the sustainability pillar and how it's leveraging the well-architected framework as a way to support customers.
Absolutely. So let me actually take a step back, and for those who are not aware of the well-architected pillar and what the well-architected framework is, let me explain that. So we have something called the AWS Well-Architected Framework. This is a framework that's going to let architects like you and me and our customers, cloud architects basically, build secure, high-performing, resilient, and efficient infrastructure for their applications and workloads. Initially, when the well-architected framework came out, there were 5 pillars for the well-architected framework. The pillars were operational excellence, performance efficiency, security, reliability, and cost optimization. And these pillars define certain best practices that helped provide a consistent approach for customers and our partners to evaluate architectures and implement scalable designs. But now, we're in a new world. We have different problems nowadays. We have like global warming, climate change. There's rapid rate of deforestation around the world. The icebergs are melting. The oceans are rising. We have to think about sustainability. This is a crisis that's affecting our businesses, and sooner or later, we're going to have to take steps. So better start early, right? Essentially, we have to optimize the delivery of sustainable products, and we have to do our bit for that. So that is why we launched a 6th pillar for the well-architected framework, which was the pillar of sustainability. It enhances the well-architected framework, and it provides a way for you to consistently measure your architecture, like I said, against defined best practices, identify certain areas of improvement, and over time, reduce your carbon footprint. Now, what is the well-architected framework sustainability pillar? What is, like, there are patterns within the sustainability pillar as well. And I'd like to dive a little deeper into that. So there are 5 areas within the sustainability pillar that you can focus on, that we define. The first pattern that you can look at is the user patterns, where you have to analyze the user behavior. Look for periods of low utilization or no utilization. Look for spikes. Look for patterns across APIs. Because these periods of low utilization or no utilization give you an opportunity to scale in. And if you're scaling in, these resources are not up and sitting there idle and just burning energy, right? So this is important to understand. You have to understand what your user patterns look like. Next would be software patterns. You also want to be able to make sure that the code that you're writing for your applications and you're deploying on the cloud, that code is good code. You have to analyze your code. You have to do static code reviews to make sure that the code is optimal, that it's using the resources efficiently. For example, are you implementing multi-threading to make sure that you are using lesser cores? Or are you vectorizing your calculations to make sure that it's not using as much compute time or as much processing time? So those would be the software patterns that you would look into. Similarly, there's also hardware patterns. Hardware patterns would be, for whatever your use case is, you should be using the minimum amount of hardware. You should be using the right sized instances. You should be very conservative when you're forecasting your capacity. And you should use direct measurements and scaled testing on real hardware to reduce the processing, to actually confirm your forecasting models. Think of use Graviton instances, use spot capacity, use solid state drives, use managed services. I do want to point out AWS managed services, because AWS managed services they take away the undifferentiated heavy lifting from you. We handle that. But also we make sure that our managed services are in the background, are designed following sustainability best practices. So as you leverage those managed services, you actually get that bit of a benefit as well. That was the hardware piece.
And our customers are super interested in this. I mean, you're kind of touching on this question here now. So yeah, thank you for your questions, and continue to bring those in, and we can actually talk more about that. So Isha, let's talk more about that.
Okay. So there are two more patterns that I want to quickly touch upon before I give it off to Parth. But I also want to touch upon data patterns and dev test patterns. So data patterns, similar to how your user patterns are, please, analyze what your data access patterns look like. What does your storage access pattern look like? You might be able to use more sustainable options for frequently accessed, slow changing data. Evaluate partitioning, move your data from memory to disk, make sure your TTL on cache is set right, make sure that you're migrating the data to cold storage tiers or infrequently accessed storage tiers or archive tiers if you're not accessing them as frequently. Use the right formats, make sure you're compressing it. So these are the kind of data patterns that you would also want to analyze as a part of following sustainability best practices. And finally, we also have the dev test patterns, wherein you want to be able to improve and increase the utilization of your development and test environments. You want to use automated build and testing tools to consolidate your build fleet and to make sure that you're maximizing the utilization of your resources. So definitely use instances which have burst capacity, spot instances, elastic database services, use containers, and other technologies that AWS does offer to make sure that you're aligning development and test capacity with your usage. So this is where, this is what the sustainability pillar actually really talks about.
Very cool. Super cool. So are there any kind of design principles that should be followed?
So for that, I think I'm going to hand it over to Parth at this point.
Awesome.
Hey, Brian, thanks for the question. Yes, we do have, we actually have 6 design principles, and some of them are overlapped with what Isha just mentioned on the best practice side. So the first one is understand your impact. Usually business outcomes measured in revenue or number of user, amount of goods sold. But try to measure the business outcomes related to sustainability impact. Usually this sustainability changes takes time to reflect. So evaluate and evaluate the impact of proposed changes over time, because it will take time where you realize the actual impact. The second one is establish the sustainability goal, not about the organization level, but also set the long-term sustainability goal for each workload. Design your architecture to reduce the impact per unit of work. For an example, how it is impacting per user or per operation or per transaction. Measuring granular impact will help you extrapolate for growth and impact that you will be having for the future, and that will help you to quantify correctly. The third one is maximize utilization. Isha touched upon this one little bit, that right size each of your workload to maximize energy efficiency of underlying hardware. Your ideal goal is to how to reduce your minimize your ideal resource time. The fourth one, and in my opinion, this is the most important one, that anticipate and adopt new hardware and software offering. Update the software versions, reduce your tech debt. We see big hesitation or delay in adopting newer version of the tools or software upgrade. Existing workload is working, why to upgrade to the newer one? But usually the newer version gives you improvement in performance and flexibility, which can leverage more for sustainability. Even for the new hardware, if you are not on the latest version, you might not be able to leverage the new hardware offering like Graviton that Mary and Isha talked about. So the idea that you design for flexibility to adopt new technology over time. Technology change very fast till this point, but it's gonna expedite it, and new offerings keeps coming more rapidly than it has ever become. The fifth one is use more managed services. Isha mentioned that leave the hard work to optimize the infrastructure on us, on AWS, and you can focus more on innovation. Leverage more services like Compute Lambda or database like RDS or Aurora or other container services. And the last design principle, that reduce the downstream impact of your cloud workload. What does that mean? A consumer or customer who's using those workload, they should not require to upgrade their devices or opt for a new services to get more benefit for their sustainability. You should design in a way that you can pass along all the effort that you are doing to your customer that will help you be more sustainable. So these are the 6 principles that are always good to keep in mind for sustainable architecture.
Yeah, maybe I can jump in here because I think, I work with a lot of customers and definitely with a lot of partners, and they're always looking for an opportunity to apply best practices. So maybe you have some examples you can share that will help guide them.
Yeah, sure. I can give you some of the example. The first one that keeps in my mind is logging, and developer community will echo that. Like developer logs a lot of logging so that they can troubleshoot easier. But send less log information. Send only critical information that will help you troubleshoot. Reduce the log retention. If you are not going to look at the previous days, previous months log, then move to a different tier, or for a compliance reason, if you have to keep it in a way that it will be more sustainable. Use a compression for your log. Several internal team over here at AWS change their compression algorithm from gzip to zstandard, and the compression ratio was improved by 30%. Just between those teams, we are able to reduce 1 exabyte of log data over the period of time. So small changes will actually end up a big impact when you work at a scale. Another example that I have is the new version of AWS SDK for JavaScript, version 3, that has been used by browsers or NPM application to connect to AWS services. We modularize the package offering. So each services that you are using, you can modularize the package and use only certain references. With that release, we are able to reduce the bundle size of 75%. Now, when you think that, okay, my packet size is 4 MB, it reduced to 2 MB, it doesn't sound too much, but think about it, where hundreds and thousands of client is actually accessing and referring your package. You are able to save a lot on memory, on storage, or even on network traffic. So those are very small changes and examples that developer can leverage that have actually compounding effect over the long period of time.
Yeah, thanks for that. And it leads to a follow-on question from me and I'm seeing some of it from the chats as well, is, kind of tell us a little bit more about how this impacts, how it helps customers to actually lower their emissions.
Yeah, so first of all, to lower your footprint, you need to measure it, right? You need to first benchmark that what is your current carbon footprint or current sustainability footprint for your workload. So we have customer carbon footprint tool that is available right now for all the customer at a global region. This tool is totally free. The way it works is you go to billing console, you go to cost and usage report, you can see carbon footprint tool. And there will be a dashboard where you can play around with a time frame, and there will be a handy visualization that will show you, based on which geographic area that has been, what is your carbon footprint for different geographic area or broad AWS services. This is the first version, and there are more functionality coming to that. But coming back to your question, if you do not have benchmark your carbon footprint or your carbon emission, go to the console and define it as a baseline. Then implement the changes that what well-architected pillar has to offer. You go through the well-architected framework and identify this pillar and answer the question that will give you some recommendation. Apply those to your workload. And over the period of time, you can come back to this tool and validate that how much carbon footprint had been reduced because of these changes. So we highly recommend to leverage well-architected pillar and design principles for that.
Yeah. So I imagine I come from the power and utility sector, right? So I imagine turning on a light switch, or maybe you've seen that Christmas Vacation movie where he turns on all the lights and the power goes zooming up. So if I go in as a customer and I'm looking at my dashboard and I see where I'm at today, I've measured it, and I go in, I work with my solution architects, we go through the well-architected framework, we apply some of these best practices that you've mentioned here today. How long does it take to see the effect? Like, how impactful can I be? Is this something, again, I can report for next year on my sustainability report? Will I already see some of that change?
Yes. So right now, our data lives at monthly cadence. So we publish new data every month with 3 months lag. So if it's not real time, that what most of the AWS services provide, but there are a couple of reasons for that. The way this tool works is AWS has to get all the powers that has been used by each individual account or each individual workload. We also work with different power supplier or utility bill that when we received, identify that which has been used. We also need to validate that what are the wind farms or what are the renewable energy project going on that certain region that your workload is, and how much we can offset. So based on all these parameters, we need to identify that what will be the carbon footprint, and that is the reason it takes roughly 3 months right now. And we are definitely trying to optimize it and make it more faster for our customer. So if you change your workload right now, within 3 months, you will start seeing the impact of the changes on this carbon footprint tool.
That's
super
awesome.
cool. Yeah, that's very cool. Yeah, so I heard a rumor that you guys may have a demo. So do you have a demo of this tool?
Yeah, Isha can show you the demo of how these tools work.
Cool.
All right. Okay, so not just the carbon footprint, but I also wanted to show you the well-architected pillar that we were talking about. So this is what the AWS Management Console looks like. You log into your Management Console, and within the search bar, you can either type well-architected and you'll find the well-architected tool. Go into the well-architected tool. If you haven't used it before, you'd have to set up the workload. You'll have to give it certain, where is the workload running? Is it production workload? Is it non-production? So there's some information that you need to define the workload, but I've already done that because I wanted to show you what's included in the pillar. So let's go to like a test workload that I have, and I'm going to continue reviewing my test workload. these are the pillars that I was talking about and that Parth also touched upon. So you see that initially there were just these 5 pillars that you see on the top: operational, security, reliability, performance, and cost. But now you also see this additional pillar here, which is the pillar of sustainability. Now, if I go into the sustainability pillar, what this does is, like I was mentioning, this is going to define certain best practices for you. It's going to ask you certain questions. Like, let's look at an example. In the sustainability pillar, the first question it's asking me is that, how are you selecting the region to support your sustainability goals? Like, which region are you going to deploy to? So it has a recommendation that you should be choosing regions that are near Amazon renewable energy projects and regions where the grid has a published carbon intensity that's lower than the other regions. So you want to make sure that you're selecting the right regions. Similarly, each of these questions is going to ask you a similar question, which is going to be based off of a best practice that AWS has identified. For example, how are you going to take advantage of your user behavior patterns? Are you going to scale with user load? Are you going to assign SLAs with your goals? So this goes back to what I was talking about, that there are 5 patterns, and this is going back to the user pattern that I was mentioning. Similarly, let's look at another question. How do you take advantage of the software and architecture patterns? Are you optimizing your software and architecture for asynchronous and scheduled jobs? So this is how the well-architected framework's sustainability pillar will actually, it's going to ask you questions. It's going to ask you questions that are going to map back to the best practices that we have defined. And when you do go through those questions and you look at the options, you will eventually sort of try and map. You'll get an idea as to how to design this workload as per best practices, following sustainability design principles. So this is what the well-architected framework is, and I would definitely recommend that you check it out if you have the time. Just if not anything, read through the questions. It's going to give you a little more understanding of what our sustainability best practices revolve around. Now, that was the well-architected framework, but I also want to show you the carbon footprint tool that Parth was talking about. So Parth mentioned that you'd go into your billing dashboard. So I'm going to go into my billing dashboard, and I'm going to go to my cost and usage reports right here on the left navigation bar. So when you go into your cost and usage report and you scroll down, you're going to see the customer carbon footprint tool. This is free. Everybody should be able to see that in their accounts. So just go into your billing dashboard and you should be able to see this pop up. Now, let me explain this very briefly. The first thing that you're going to see is that you're going to be able to select a window of time or a date range, basically, monthly, because it's at a monthly granularity. So I've selected that, let's say I'm going to start at Jan 2020, and we're going to look at the ending month is going to be June 2022. So I want you to tell me the carbon footprint between, like, what is my carbon footprint been for this time range? Now, this is what the dashboard is actually showing me. It is telling me that my carbon footprint, my AWS estimated emissions are 0.6. And all of these carbon emissions are in metric tons of carbon dioxide. So you see this little abbreviation, MTCO2E. This is what the unit is that is defining what your carbon emissions are looking like. Now, this is my total carbon emissions in green. What are my carbon emissions for the workloads that are running in my AWS account right now? And this number is an interesting number because this tells you what are the emissions, the greenhouse gas emissions that you've saved by just being on AWS. Had I deployed the same workload in my own facilities, I would have seen an increased carbon emission. And I'm saving 1.0 just by being on AWS. And how am I making that saving? I'm saving 0.6 because AWS has some renewable energy projects that we are using in the background. And we're also saving 0.4 because we're making sure that we're using our resources, our systems effectively. We're making efficient decisions, sustainable design. We're following design principles in the background to make sure that it's happening in a sustainable fashion. So you're effectively saving 1.0 MTCO2E just by being on AWS. Now, that's your carbon emissions summary. It also tells you your summary based on geography, based on your usage patterns and wherever you're deploying your workloads. My workloads right now, at least in my AWS account, are just in the Americas. That's why you only see Americas. But let's say you are deploying across other regions globally, then you will see an aggregated view of your usage based on geography as well. And finally, I also wanted to mention this little bit here, which shows you what the emission is looking like on a service level. What is the emission that the EC2 instances are generating? What is the emission that S3 is generating? So you can view by geography and you can view by service. You can also look at your carbon emission statistics on a monthly. You can look at this chart. It shows you your carbon emissions on a monthly level, but you can also switch to quarterly as well as annually. And finally, this is an interesting graph that I wanted to share, because what it's doing is it's showing you the projected changes in your yearly emissions as AWS will work towards attaining our goal of powering our operations with 100% renewable energy for our data centers. So as we build more renewable energy projects around the world, you will see this forecasted carbon emission change. As we implement more renewable energy projects in the background, you'll see that this chart looks different over time. So this is what the carbon footprint tool basically comprises of. It's a way to understand the very first place that you're going to start, the baseline that you're going to do that Parth was talking about. This is where you're going to start. You're going to have to understand what your carbon emissions look like right now in order to understand the impact and then effectively go towards optimization. That's it.
Very cool. Very cool. I mean, I think this is super interesting. This tool looks very easy to use. I mean, it's pretty simple. I mean, it's really awesome what you have here.
Thank you.
Yeah, and just to add here, it is the first version of the tool, right? There is a lot of more information that has been coming to this tool. We are working towards identifying all the requests that all the users has been requested from us.
Yeah, and one parting comment I wanted to make, Brian. Parth and I are both going to be at reInvent. We have a workshop as well that we are running around sustainability. It's going to talk about how you're going to be able to detect deforestation in a certain area using geospatial images and the data sets within our Amazon Sustainability Data Initiative. So if anyone's interested, please drop by. I think it'd be a great learning experience. You'll get to learn about sustainability, but you also get to do a little bit of machine learning and a little bit of conjunction of AWS services as well. So thank you.
Super cool. Thank you, Parth. Thank you, Isha. This has been super interesting. Thank you for showing us the tool and telling us about the well-architected pillar. And if customers want to find out more about this, are there any blog posts or anything out that you want to kind of tell us about? Or any links?
Yeah, we can drop out some links on the chat where they can find out more information about the well-architected sustainability pillar.
Awesome. And thank you. And definitely stay tuned for AWS On Air.
Thank you.